This SSD doesn't seem to exist to us Westerners, save for an entry in TechPowerUp's database anyway, and yet if you shop on Temu, you can get your hands on it. There is a lot that's, how do I say this politely, confusing about this drive. So let's take a look and see what this drive, that doesn't exist according to Lexar, has to offer, and whether or not you should be buying SSDs from Temu. This is the Lexar Thor Pro, and just on the face of it, it seems like a pretty impressive drive, right? I mean, up to 7 GB per second, PCI Gen 4x4, and more style than most drives offer these days. So this has to be decent, right? Well, no. Okay, first things first, let's look at the back of the box, where you will see something a little confusing. Despite it saying PCI Gen 4x4 at the top, it says PCI Gen 3 as the first bullet point. Aha! We caught them red-handed! Oh no, wait, Google Translate says that's just saying it's twice as fast as a Gen 3 drive. That does make sense. Okay, but maybe the drive is made out of cheese instead of NAND flash. Oh no, it's an integrate controller with Longsys flash, Longsys being Lexar's parent company and a bona fide NAND maker. Okay, maybe it isn't quite as bad as you might think then. That doesn't mean that there aren't some quirks here. Using the integrate NVMe SSD Flash ID tool by Ochkin Vadim shows that the Longsys branded flash appears to be reporting as Intel 144-layer QLC packages with 1024 gigabits per die with 8 total dies. Considering there are only 4 actual flash chips on here, I would hazard a guess that that's 2048 gigabit per chip or 256 gigabyte packages. That's quite the step down from the usual 1 or 2 terabytes per chip that I've seen from the likes of Micron with their 276-layer Gen 9 flash. To name the controller specifically, it's an Integrate IG5236, a DRAM-less Gen 4x4 NVMe 1.4 controller, and at least on this 1TB model, it's only rated for 6500 megabytes per second on reads and a pretty shocking 3000 megabytes per second on writes. Even on paper that's slow, with Lexar's Western drives like the NM800, which even in its 1TB model still offers 7500 megabytes per second on reads and 6300 megabytes per second on writes. But of course, that's the specs. Let's see if the performance figures tell the same story. Starting with Crystal Disk Mark, the Thor Pro comes in dead last, even behind the middling Orico E5000. Admittedly, the reads are sort of pretty midfield with a slight spec beating 6.65 gigabytes per second, with the writes being the major letdown at just 2.77 gigabytes per second, even on a completely fresh drive. As a point of east-west comparison, Lexar's own NM800 drive offers nearly chart-topping, at least Gen 4 read performance, and while it's not quite as strong on writes, it's still over twice as fast as the Thor Pro. That is significant. With a queue depth of 1 instead of 8, we see equal bottom-of-the-barrel performance, at least besting the Orico E5000 this time. Although interestingly, about half of the drives offer faster reads than writes, while others are the opposite way. This Thor Pro is the former, with actually somewhat respectable reads for a Gen 4 drive, but the second slowest on writes. Amazingly, with a random 4KB block size and a queue depth of 32, the Thor Pro and NM800 are functionally tied on writes, although the Thor Pro did offer the slowest reads that I've tested outright. It's a similar story with a queue depth of 1, although it's only a slight dip in performance in both reads and writes from the NM800. As for ASSSD, at least on the sequential test, it's the same story as Crystal Disk Mark, with the read performance being pretty typical for a Gen 4 drive, but the write performance being literally Gen 3 speeds. Again, the NM800 offers twice the performance here, at least on writes. With a random 4KB block, amazingly, at least on the write performance, the Thor Pro actually beats the NM800. It's effectively tied with the Orico E5000 for the slowest Gen 4 drive on reads, but those writes are actually really not bad. Unfortunately for the Thor Pro, if you increase the threads to 64, you'll start to struggle by comparison. It came in second to last, behind a Gen 3 drive, the WD-SN750, in both reads and writes. That's not exactly promising performance. In ATTO, we see a few more interesting trends, although my god, the NM800 is all over the place. A noticeable dip at 4K, flatline between 32 and 256K, but excellent performance at the top end. Our Thor Pro, though, is kind of middling here too, with a flat spot between 64 and 128K, and a sharp drop off in performance with 32MB and larger blocks on reads. Write performance is basically a flat line, but it's also lower than even a Gen 3 drive, the SN750 again, which isn't exactly amazing. Actually, copying data was also a little disappointing. Copying from a RAM disk to try and get the best performance, all this could do was 2.5GB per second, which is Gen 3 speeds. Copying from a faster Gen 4 drive was also capped at around 2.5, which isn't much of a surprise, I suppose, but still. My usual duplication stress test returned 1.4GB per second, which isn't amazing either. It isn't exactly terrible, but it's more like Gen 3 speeds, like I said. Even more interestingly, after just 180GB, the SoC cache filled up and performance utterly tanked. Some drives can give gigabytes per second, like the T710 being a great example, but this offered between just 0 and 400MB per second, averaging around 100 to 150MB per second or so. That's hard drive territory. Oh, this isn't a temperature problem. The drive maxed out at 47 degrees Celsius, which is well below the smart thermal throttling limit. For context, the NM800 was able to copy from the same fast Gen 4 drive at up to 3.4GB per second, almost a gig faster than the Thor Pro, and the duplication sat around 2GB with peaks up to 2.4 or so, and when the SoC cache ran out after 350GB, it still offered between 7 and 900MB per second at first, and then more like 4 to 500MB per second after that. That is a significant improvement by comparison. The confusing thing here is that you would expect this to be an absolute bargain. I mean, isn't that what Temu is all about? The cheapest tat you can find for pennies? Well, this thing isn't that. This 1TB model is £64, which makes it more expensive than Crucial's P310, P3 Plus, and a myriad of other even Gen 4x4 drives that offer considerably better performance. Like, seriously, if this was £30, then sure, I get it. It's worse than its Western counterparts, but for the price, it'd be hard to argue. But at £64? No chance. Do not buy this unless, like the kind viewer who sent this in, you have a whole bunch of Temu credit. Thanks, Chris. As for the wider question of whether or not you should be buying SSDs from Temu in the first place, well, I'll say this. I wouldn't. That might be because it's just not as good as drives you can buy on Amazon. It might be because you're more likely to get fakes or knockoffs, or it might just be because this isn't even cheaper. Regardless, I wouldn't. But that's me, and I would love to hear what you think in the comments down below. Unlike usual, I likely won't leave a link to this in the description, but if you want to find it, I'm sure you can. Probably not that difficult, but I will leave a link to Gen 4x4 drives on Amazon if you do want to check them out. You can also check out the subscribe button if you want to see more videos like this one. You can also check out plenty of other videos on the end cards, and if you want to check out my own hardware, the open source response time and latency testing tools, those are available at osrt.com, linked in the description as well. If you also have some interesting hardware that you fancy me taking a look at, feel free to let me know on Discord. And otherwise, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed it, we'll see you all in the next video.